3 a.m., the 19th of December 1944. The Americans had been driving east only days before, but now the eastern Belgium belonged to the Wehrmacht again. The first SS Panzer spearheads had smashed through the lines, and in the churn of retreat, the GIs left more than footprints. One M4 Sherman lay half-ditched at the edge of a frozen field, its turret turned toward a road they no longer held. Feldwebel Otto Koppel, battalion fitter, who has kept Panthers alive since Operation Barbarossa, waves his men forward. "Get the turret safe off," he says. Then we see what the Amos call a medium. The stenciling on the glacis reads M4, a 3. The unit marks say 7th Armored Division, pushed hard all morning and gone by noon. They expect junk. They find a plan. Private Kramer snorts when he opens the driver's hatch. "A plaque with grease points," he says, tapping a bolted plate engraved with tiny arrows and intervals in English. "Who labels a tank for idiots?" Koppel answers without looking up. "An army that plans to issue thousands to men who have never seen one." He points at the transmission bulge, one big cast housing with 12 identical bolts. "2 men, 1 wrench," he says. "You could swap the whole nose on a roadside." They pull the engine deck. A Ford V8 sits square and low, 8 cylinders in a perfect V like a truck plant's dream. Kramer's hand finds a stamped plate with a serial, a date, and a torque spec. The manifolds are plain, the carb is commercial, the filters unclip. Koppel thinks of the Panther's Maybach wrapped in spaghetti, of oil leaks that take a day to chase and a week to fix. "This one," he says, "was built to be removed as a unit." In the turret, Lieutenant Franz Baer, an engineer officer who once shadowed Henschel subcontractors, finds something worse than good metal. Good enough. A Westinghouse gyro stabilizer the size of a coffee can clings to the 75mm mount. "They stabilize the gun," he murmurs, turning the knurled knobs. Not perfectly, but while moving. He imagines a Panther gunner, stop to shoot, then starting again, then stopping, losing seconds each time. He runs his hand over a laminated card riveted to the turret wall. Asterisk, traverse. Electric. Elevation. Hand. Electric. Fault. Check fuses. Asterisk. Pictures. Arrows. No poetry. By the loader's feet sits a stamped wire basket. Baer pulls a brass cap tube, twists, and water beads on his glove. "Wet stowage," he says. He's heard rumors ammunition in water-jacketed bins to keep propellant cool, to keep it from cooking when hit. He thinks of the Panther's ready racks, warm under the turret ring. Under the hull, Koppel squints at the suspension. Vertical volute springs, 3 bogie units, 6 road wheels, each bogie held to the hull by a handful of bolts you can reach with a mitt. No interleaving, no inner wheels buried behind outer ones. "I can change one of these in an hour," he says. He remembers a Tiger in Italy, road wheels frozen together with clay and ice. A day's labor to change the inner one. 3 men with sledges. He runs a thumb over an end connector and a track shoe stamped like a frying pan. It's ugly. It's perfect. The gun is short by German standards. The armor is not thick by anyone's standards. The welds are broad and clean. The hull knows a single casting you could make by the ton. Kramer opens a side bin and finds a canvas-wrapped tool roll, a sealed bag of spare vision blocks, a coil of telephone wire, a tin of fuses, and a manual printed on glossy paper. He flips it open and laughs without humor. "Every step has pictures," he says. "It tells you how to time the distributor." Baer wipes snow from the serials and jots them down with a carpenter's pencil on the Sherman's rear deck. Asterisk, Chrysler build plate, Ford engine, Westinghouse stabilizer, Timken bearings. Asterisk, too many names. 1 tank. He hears a Panther idling down the lane, sees steam puffing from the exhaust, knows 2 final drives in his workshop, wait for gears that will not come this month. He looks again at the Sherman's casting marks, and the way the hull number matches the turret number and the engine tags. They designed this to be made by anyone, he says. And the same, every time. Capel squats by the glacis and does the one calculation that matters. The Panther parked up the road is better at killing tanks. The Tiger waiting for fuel in the village is better at scaring men. But this machine, under his hands, cheap to cast, quick to weld, easy to service, could be built by the thousand, while his fitters beg for one more final drive and another crate of needle bearings. He feels the chill that isn't from the snow. We can beat one of these, he says quietly. Maybe 3. But not all of them. Behind the hedgerow, a column of American trucks groans west with fuel and winter rations. Somewhere beyond Street Vith, another line of Shermans is already climbing out of rail cars. The men around the abandoned tank fall silent, listening to a sound that is not engines, but arithmetic. That night, the Sherman lay under a tarp, near the division's forward repair park outside Recht. The mechanics had dragged it in with a half-track, stripped the turret, and set up flood lamps powered by a Panther's auxiliary generator. The snow came down heavy, muffling everything except the hiss of welding rods. Inside the workshop tent, the German engineers began what they called an Anatomieprüfung, a dissection. Oberleutnant Franz Baer supervised. He had written factory assessments on captured T-34 seconds in 1942. Those reports had become infamous in Panzer Command because they revealed how Soviet simplicity embarrassed German refinement. What he saw now made that same unease crawl back up his spine. The first discovery came with the transmission. 2 men pulled it free in under 40 minutes, using only hand tools. The American design split the Sherman's powertrain into modular sections: transmission, differential, engine, and suspension, each detachable as a complete unit. The casing was heavy cast steel, not milled, crude, but incredibly strong. The clutch linkage used a universal coupling, interchangeable with any other M4 variant. They designed this like furniture, Capel muttered, prying at a bolt. Unbolt, slide, replace. They could teach IKEA something. Baer noted the material markings: alloy 8650. Not high nickel steel. Not the rare vanadium mix that German engineers prized. Just robust medium carbon stock that could be forged in any large mill. Cheap, abundant, strong enough. They accept limits, Baer said softly. We keep trying to conquer them. The electrical system shocked them even more literally. Every wire was color-coded and terminated in identical plug couplings. The wiring harness detached in a single bundle. You could wire this in the dark, said Kramer, shaking his head. The starter was the same model used in American trucks, the voltage identical. The headlamp's sealed beam units were identical to civilian ones. Every component screamed mass production. They removed a side armor plate, expecting complex weld seams. Instead, they found straightforward rolled steel plates, joined by wide fillet welds, no beveled edges, no machined joints. Ugly, but fast. Each seam had a small brass plate tacked nearby, stamped with initials, factory inspector marks. Baer traced one with his glove. CDL 41. Fisher Body Plant. A factory that once built car chassis now built tanks. Capel compared that to his own Panthers. Thousands of hand-fitted parts, welding tolerances so tight that one mismatched plate could jam the entire hull assembly. We're sculptors, he said bitterly. They're bricklayers. The floor around the Sherman filled with discarded panels, bearings, track shoes. The more they stripped, the clearer the truth became. Nothing about the M4 was special. Every piece seemed designed to be replaced by another identical one built thousands of kilometers away. No special steels, no exotic machining, no artistic weld beads, just method. The gearbox was next. Its gears were straight cut, noisy, but easy to make. The Panther used precision ground helical gears, requiring highly skilled machinists and case-hardening furnaces. The Sherman's gears could be cut in any medium workshop. Baer realized this was intentional. The Americans had designed their tanks to be built by factories that yesterday made washing machines, and tomorrow could make something else. Capel turned the differential over, reading the casting marks. Timken Bearing Co., Cleveland. The bearings were sealed units, non-adjustable, replaceable, maintenance-free. The Germans still hand-shimmed theirs. He picked up a hammer, struck one. "You can't adjust it," he said. "You just replace it." Bear replied. "Exactly, because they can." When they examined the gun, the 75mm M3, their mood shifted from curiosity to quiet calculation. It was smaller than the Panther's 75mm KWK 42, less velocity, thinner barrel walls. Yet the breech was simple, light, reliable. The recoil system was compact. "We could make this in a week," one machinist said. "The problem is, they made 10,000 last month." The loader's space, the radio compartment, even the driver's seat told the same story. Everything was standardized. Same dials, same pedals, same gauges as American trucks. They realized that a Sherman driver could climb into any other Sherman, anywhere in the world, and start it without confusion. In the Wehrmacht, drivers had to memorize controls that varied by model. When Bear unscrewed a small panel near the loader's feet, he found a laminated card, inside a pouch, Operator's Maintenance Schedule, M4A3. It listed every daily, weekly, and monthly task with illustrations. No translation needed. Even the grease nipples were numbered to match the chart. "They assume the crew are mechanics," said Capel. "But not engineers. That's the difference." By dawn, the Sherman lay in pieces. The men stood around the dismembered hull, the stripped powertrain, the simple, color-coded cables. They had expected to laugh at crude American work. Instead, they felt something heavier. Bear closed his notebook. "We cannot outbuild this," he said quietly. "Each one costs them maybe half of what a Panther does, maybe less." "How many do they have?" someone asked. 20,000 by now, Bear answered, "and every month more. Built in factories we cannot bomb fast enough." Silence. The Panther engines idled outside, each one worth a week's worth of precision labor, each one prone to breaking final drives every 100 kilometers. The Sherman had shown them the battlefield's future. It wasn't perfection, it was replication. Capel looked at the rows of replacement bolts, stacked neatly on a bench, identical to the ones they'd removed. He didn't smile. "We build masterpieces," he said. "They build machines." And for the first time, the word machine sounded like defeat. By midday the following day, Bear's report had already reached the regimental workshop in Malmedy. His superiors, skeptical, ordered a full comparative trial, Sherman against Panther, not in battle, but on the workshop floor. The captured M4A3 would be rebuilt, tested, and measured part by part. What began as curiosity turned into something closer to obsession. The first tests concerned weight and maintenance time. The Panther's 45-ton frame required 4 men and a chain hoist just to remove the transmission access plate. The Sherman's lighter 30-ton hull used quick-release bolts and hinged engine decks. 2 men could strip the upper rear in 20 minutes. The Germans timed it. 22 minutes. Exactly. For the Panther, 2 hours, 16 minutes, and that only with specialized tools. The fuel system comparison followed. The Panther's twin Maybach HL 230 fuel tanks required careful balancing equal fill levels or the engine sputtered. The Sherman's Ford V8 simply ran from either tank, automatically switching if one ran dry. The American design didn't care about precision, it cared about running. "Look at the carburetor," Capel said, holding it up. "One-piece casting, same as a truck. They don't adjust it, they just swap it." He turned to the Panther's mechanic. "How many hours to tune your Maybach?" The man shrugged. 3. 4 if cold. Capel pointed at the Ford. 10 minutes. They examined armor next. The Panther's armor was magnificent, sloped, homogeneous, hardened, and thick. The Sherman's was thinner, simpler, and less uniform. But the welds were perfect and consistent. "You could train a welder in a week to do this," Bear said. "He doesn't need to understand armor theory, just a steady hand." The Germans began listing every component that would fail first in long campaigns: bearings, suspension arms, final drives, cooling systems. In every category, the Sherman's parts were not better, they were simpler. Each failure could be fixed by replacement rather than adjustment. They realized that the American Army had turned tank repair into an assembly line process. When the Panther threw a track, it meant hours of spanners, heat, and curse words. The Sherman's one-piece track blocks with open-pin connectors could be replaced in minutes. The track links even had arrow stamps showing the direction of travel, an insult to any professional mechanic, but a gift to a teenage conscript. Bear stood by the stripped Sherman and made the only observation that mattered. They designed this tank for men who have never seen one before. And they can train them in 2 weeks to fight, drive, and fix it. That was when the real number came up: production rates. The technical officer from HQ had brought captured Allied data. The Ford plant in Detroit built 500 Sherman engines every week. Chrysler produced complete hulls on an automotive line with 11,000 workers. Fisher Body and Press Steel Car Company together rolled out more tanks in a month than all of Germany's factories combined could in a season. Bear's voice dropped. One M4A3 cost them about $40,000. Our Panther costs over 120,000 Reichsmarks. The Tiger? Over 250,000. They can build 3 for every one of ours. Maybe 4. Capel whistled low. 3 tanks for every one Panther, he said. And each one lighter, easier to move, easier to fuel. What happens when 3 meet 1? Bear looked at him. The one wins the duel, he said, but loses the war. In the corner, the crew, testing the gun, had their own revelation. The 75mm M3 fired faster. Not harder, but faster. The ammunition came in tidy, standardized boxes, brass cases identical to aircraft shells, powder charges, uniform, all stamped with production dates. The loader's ready racks were placed at chest height, easy to reach. The Panther's loader had to dig under the breech and stretch into the turret basket. "We think of performance," said one engineer. "They think of workflow." By evening, the comparison was complete. The results read like a eulogy for German engineering pride. Average time to engine removal: Sherman 45 minutes. Panther 5 hours. Average time to replace final drive: Sherman 1.5 hours. Panther nearly a day. Crew training time: American estimate 3 weeks. German 6 months minimum. Production time per vehicle: Sherman 10 days. Panther 40. Bear read the last line twice. 40 days, he said softly. That's our problem. They've turned tanks into consumables. For Germany, a Panther was a masterpiece. Each required the precision of watchmaking and the supervision of skilled craftsmen. Every tank lost was a tragedy. For the Americans, the Sherman was an appliance. Break it, replace it, move on. As the night deepened, Bear drafted his report. He wrote it plainly, without poetry. The American tank is inferior in protection, inferior in armament, but designed with industrial logic. Every aspect prioritizes mass production, field service, and standardization. It is not a soldier's tank, it is an engineer's strategy turned into steel. Our tanks are superior machines, but unsustainable in modern war. He closed the notebook and sat back, the tent lights flickering across the stripped hull of the Sherman. He saw not one tank, but thousands on trains, on ships, rolling out of factories that never slept. Capel, wiping oil from his hands, muttered, So this is how we lose, not to their guns, but their factories. Bear nodded slowly. To their factories, he said. And to the men who understood that simplicity wins when the world is on fire. The 22nd of December 1944, Schnee Eifel sector. The snow had turned from slush to ice. Engines whined at idle just to keep from freezing. Fuel was rationed to the drop. While most of the 116th Panzer Division waited for resupply, Oberleutnant Behr's captured Sherman sat in a makeshift workshop barn. The field test was over. Now Berlin wanted an official report, something the Heereswaffenamt could use to evaluate American tank construction standards. The irony was unbearable. The Reich's best engineers were freezing in barns, studying enemy vehicles built in factories warmer than any German home left standing. Behr and Kappel began the teardown anew, this time with an audience, 2 staff officers, and a weapons inspector sent from Kassel. Their orders were explicit. Determine why American tanks were so numerous, and if German industry could adopt any of their methods. They started with the engine again. The inspector, a tall man with spectacles fogged from the cold, took notes while Kappel demonstrated. He disconnected the Ford's oil lines with bare hands, no special fittings. Threaded joints, ordinary, he said. Standard diameter. You can make this in any lathe. He pointed to the exhaust manifolds. Sand cast. Not machined. We machine everything. The inspector frowned. We machine for precision. Exactly, said Kappel. They don't need precision to make it work. They design it so precision doesn't matter. The inspector didn't reply. He was staring at the stamped serials, realizing each piece fit without hand fitting, without adjustment. He knew what that meant. Tolerance stacking. Something German engineers considered unacceptable. Yet the American tank ran smoothly, despite it. They had designed the whole vehicle around the idea that parts wouldn't be perfect, but would fit anyway. When they turned to the armor, the staff officers leaned closer. The Sherman's glacis plate was a single rolled piece of homogeneous steel, bent slightly at the edges, welded directly to the side armor. No interlocking joints? One asked, incredulous. None, Behr replied. They trust the welds. The seams are wide, the filler thick. It's faster this way. How do they maintain strength? Behr shrugged. Quantity. If one weld fails, 10 more hold. He explained how American tank factories used huge jigs and rotating assembly rigs, how welders stood on moving platforms as tanks rolled past like cars. We build like craftsmen, he said. They build like blacksmiths with conveyor belts. The inspector's pencil froze halfway across the page. How many plants can produce these? Behr didn't look up. At least 5 major ones. Chrysler, Fisher, Pressed Steel, Ford, Lima Locomotive, maybe more. Each can turn out hundreds a month. The silence afterward was worse than any shelling. The officers understood. Germany had one primary Panther plant at MAN in Nuremberg, another at Daimler-Benz, and a handful of subcontractors constantly short of steel. Even running at capacity, they could not match one American factory. The inspection moved on. The gun, optics, and turret systems, all the same story. The gyro stabilizer was simple to install and easy to service. The sights were clear, rugged, and mass-produced. The radio was modular, pull it out, plug in another. The staff officers took notes but avoided each other's eyes. When they examined the suspension, Kappel dropped the hammer he'd been holding and laughed. Look here, he said, prying off a bogie cap. This bearing is lubricated for life. They seal it. We use grease fittings that must be serviced every 200 kilometers. They build theirs so the crew never has to think about it. He gestured toward the Panther outside. Our bogie needs a trained fitter with the right wrench set. Their bogie? Any farmhand with a spanner could fix it. The inspector finally spoke. It's barbaric. No, said Behr quietly. It's modern. He picked up one of the American manuals they'd found inside the tank waterproof cover. Thick paper, printed diagrams. This is how you fight a long war, he said. Every soldier becomes his own mechanic. That evening, as they packed the disassembled parts for transport to Kassel, a courier arrived from Corps headquarters. He carried an order stamped "Eilt," urgent. The Sherman's components were to be sent intact to Berlin for industrial study. The vehicle itself would be rebuilt for testing at Kummersdorf. The note included a single question from the Armaments Ministry. Could German factories produce a tank of similar simplicity? Bear didn't answer immediately. He stood in the doorway of the barn, snow dusting his cap, watching a column of Panthers crawling east. One backfired loudly, another trailed smoke. He turned back to the inspector. "No," he said. "We can't. Not without unlearning everything we believe about engineering." The inspector asked, "And if we did?" "Then it wouldn't be German anymore," Bear replied. "It would be American, and that's why they're winning." When the transport truck left at midnight, carrying the Sherman's engine and turret down the mountain, Bear stayed behind. He knew the report that would accompany it. An acknowledgement that Germany's greatest weakness wasn't the enemy's weapons, it was their own pride. Somewhere to the west, the Americans were already counterattacking. New Shermans were rolling off ships in Antwerp, replacing every one lost in the snow. The Panther battalion in Streetvith had 17 tanks left. Each one was a masterpiece, each one irreplaceable. And in a frozen barn in Belgium, the man who had taken them apart understood the truth better than anyone. The war would not be lost in the field. It was already lost on the factory floor. January 3rd, 1945. The Ardennes offensive is broken. The snow still falls, but the sound of American artillery now rolls eastward. What's left of 116th Panzer Division limps through the ruins of Hufvud's tanks with empty fuel tanks, trucks abandoned, horses dead in their traces. Bear's workshop detachment follows the retreat, one Panther running on fumes, 2 trucks dragging a half-assembled Tiger. The Sherman they dissected is gone, shipped away weeks ago to Berlin, but its ghost follows them. They stop outside a shattered farmhouse being used as a refit point. The mechanics unload crates of scavenged parts. One Maybach gearbox, a crate of worn final drives, and a jerrycan of frozen fuel. Kappel squats beside a Panther with its right track thrown. The wheels are packed solid with ice and mud. "Half these machines will freeze to death before we do," he says. Bear doesn't answer. He's reading a message packet just arrived from Berlin, a copy of his earlier report stamped Technische Beurteilung ANR, 21/45. It includes commentary from the Heereswaffenamt. The ministry's reply is as cold as the air around them. The American M4 series tank demonstrates the advantages of standardized industrial manufacturing. However, conversion of existing German production facilities to comparable methods is impractical under current conditions. Recommendation: continue production of Panther and Tiger II to maintain qualitative superiority. Qualitative superiority. Bear closes the folder and stares into the snow. It's the same delusion, written in ink instead of shouted from podiums. He looks at the men struggling to get their Panther's road wheels free. "Qualitative superiority," he mutters, "and we can't move 10 kilometers without breaking a final drive." Kappel joins him, wiping his hands with an oily rag. "What did Berlin say?" "They said we're right," Bear answers, "and that it doesn't matter." The irony deepens when, that afternoon, an American column appears across the valley, Shermans, dozens of them, moving in perfect rhythm. Through binoculars, the Germans watch them cross a blown bridge using a prefabricated Bailey span already assembled by engineers. Within 20 minutes, the entire column is across. Kappel lowers his binoculars. "They move like trucks." "They are trucks," Bear replies, "just armored ones." When dusk falls, the mechanics huddle around a small fire inside the barn. Kappel opens a ration tin with his knife. "You know," he says, "when we took apart that Sherman, I thought it was crude. Now I think we were the fools. They've built an army that forgives mistakes. We built one that punishes them." Bear nods. A Panther needs perfect terrain, perfect fuel, perfect maintenance. A Sherman just needs gasoline and a man with a wrench. He tosses the last page of the report into the fire. Perfection is killing us. At dawn, a Tiger II rolls into the yard. It's from the 501st Heavy Battalion, one of the last. The crew needs help, their left track jammed with frozen gravel. The tank weighs 70 tons. The mechanics gather tools, torches, crowbars. After an hour, the commander climbs down, fuming. The track's locked. We'll have to heat it. Capel glances at the tank, its armor immense, its gun monstrous, and then at the Panther beside it, smaller, elegant, crippled. He thinks of the Sherman's simple bogies, changed by hand in minutes. We can't win with this, he says. The commander snarls. You're just a fitter. Leave the war to soldiers. Capel just laughs. The Americans left it to factory workers, and that's why they're winning. Later, Bear is called to the battalion CP. The staff wants him to prepare a technical summary for higher command. Be positive, the major says. Emphasize that the Panther still outguns the Sherman. Bear writes exactly what's asked, then adds one final paragraph the major will never forward. The M4 is not a tank. It is a manifestation of industrial doctrine. It can be built faster than we can destroy it. It can be repaired by anyone. It embodies a philosophy we have never learned, the mass production of adequacy. Each unit inferior, yet together undefeatable. By evening, the Panther column receives orders to withdraw toward Prüm. The Tiger II remains stuck, frozen solid. They leave it behind. On the road, Bear rides in a truck beside Capel. Through the open flap he watches smoke rising from the valleys, the last fires of the offensive. Behind them, the American artillery thunders, and he imagines the rows of Shermans that follow. Not perfect, not beautiful, but endless. Capel breaks the silence. Do you think Berlin will ever understand? Bear shakes his head. They will when there's nothing left to understand. A kilometer ahead, a burning half-track lights up the night. The convoy halts, idling engines steaming in the cold. For a moment the air smells of gasoline, oil, and defeat, the same smell that came from that first captured Sherman. Bear closes his eyes. He can still see it. The cast hull, the color-coded cables, the grease chart bolted to the dashboard. A machine made for men, not masters. They built their tanks to lose dozens and keep fighting, he says quietly. We built ours to never lose, and in doing so, ensured that we would.